Thank you for joining us again on another episode of the Command Journey podcast. I'm your host, Michael Diamond. We have a wonderful topic for you this week. We're going to be discussing elevator modernization and ASME code changes. And so I've brought some members of the Command team forward for this discussion, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And so if you would, let's begin our introductions.
This is Rocco Galassi. I'm the North Central Regional Sales Manager for Commend. I've been with Commend for 2 years now. I've been in the security industry over 20 plus years, mostly with integration side. I have a vast knowledge of security when it comes to communication. This is something that's been new to me, but it is something that I've been obviously working on over the last couple of years since I've been with Commend. So I think there's a lot of value that I can add when it comes to the communication side in this conversation.
Great.
Luke Doucette, technical sales engineer with Commend. I've been here 2 years, been in the industry for a total of 10 years in various degrees in the engineering side, technical side, sales side.
Great. Okay, so at the top of the show, what I'd like to do with everybody in our listening audience is do a level set. And so we understand sort of the broader topic at large that we're going to talk about. Elevator code requirements are just that. They're a requirement. So if your client's elevator is inspected and deemed inaccessible or dangerous in any way, they could be issued certain requirements to meet the standards of their area's expectations or risk facing fines and even litigation. So the industry is going to continue to evolve. Modern technology is going to continue to evolve with it, with new and innovative elevator systems being developed almost every year. It's more important than ever that builders and elevator inspectors understand the ins and outs of a thoroughly tested and proven safety code. That means that we who work in the industry must also understand how those changes to the code affect us and affect our clients. So ASME, or the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, developed 8 major codes addressing safety in design, construction, installation, operation, inspections, testing, maintenance, alteration, and the repair of elevators. I promise you we won't cover all that on the show. The ASME elevator safety codes were created to set a standard in the industry to minimize accidents and injury, as well as costly downtime. Additionally, these standards seek to provide consistency in elevator construction and installations across North America. So, ASME 17.1 defines safety for all aspects of elevators and similar conveyances. It's updated regularly and considered the latest set of standards and important code changes for elevator maintenance and repair. I'd like to ask Luke, if you could go into just the broadest of terms of how that most recent code changes affect some of the states in North America.
For sure. So realistically, the broader aspect of the code change really affects that of the hearing impaired. Traditional elevator safety has been really centered around visually impaired communications on the audio side. The new code change adds significant changes to that, where it offers two-way messaging via text and replies with yes and no buttons, so everybody can communicate equally with the operators.
So these changes are meant to better assist riders, right, who are hard deaf, hard of hearing, or speech impaired during those emergencies, right? It also has to tie in with emergency personnel to have a better view of the inside of the elevator via a camera to assess the situation and provide nonverbal communication, right?
Correct. Yeah. So one of the code requirements is to have a camera that can see the entire floor of the elevator cab to allow operators to see if there is in fact somebody unconscious, somebody sick, somebody hurt on the floor. Traditional elevator monitoring never had that. So somebody push a button and a call would come in, they wouldn't hear anything, and they would just hang up the call because they would think somebody just pushed the button by accident. This is a way around that to ensure that somebody is taken care of appropriately.
So, Rocco, I wonder if you would, when you approach a customer who, or a dealer for that matter, who has this in their ballpark, in their wheelhouse, they have to deal with a elevator modernization to bring it up to the code change requirement.
Mhm.
How do you start that conversation with them? What are your bullet points when you talk to them about it?
So I would actually say today the conversations is brought up probably by Comment ourselves. I would say today customers don't realize the code as much as they should, and I would say that most states really don't push it as hard as they should. So I would say today we actually bring it up and ask if they've heard of the code. We'll get some people, I'd say probably maybe 50% of them that say that maybe they've heard, but they haven't done anything with it because nobody's pushing it. But so what we try to do is we bring it up to them so they know, hey, this is something that you're going to have to do. We want a future plan for this, so let's get it, as much knowledge as we can and understand your system that you have in sight, and understand what our process would be to get a modernized. That process can take a little while, and also there's a lot of involvement in different divisions and different people management within that company. So it's a conversation that takes a little while, and it needs to start early and then go through the whole process of what needs to be done and make sure that we're not missing something. This is a safety violation, so we want to make sure that at least everything's documented from start to finish and make sure that we follow codes to make sure people are safe.
Certainly. Okay, Luke, I wonder if you might take us through what a code changed elevator would go from, right, to what it would look like after a command solution was put in.
Traditionally, you would have a basic dialer in the elevator with a speaker and a microphone attached to it. You push a button and it dials out. A lot of the infrastructure inside the elevators is very antiquated and very outdated in terms of on the communication side. There hasn't been any updates on the communication side in quite a while in terms of the minimum requirements. So moving forward with the commend side, we are now installing actual touchscreens or non-touchscreens, depending on the customer's request, along with additional buttons in elevators that are used for the yes and the no functions on the call functions. And when the button is pressed, a call goes out, and then the operator can then push live messages to the screen, to the touch screen within the elevator. And the occupant can then push yes and no and get that reply back live to the operator.
I know that Commend has assisted some of the dealers to put this solution into a live environment. We won't talk about any of those specific sites today, but I would like to get an idea of some of the things from the technical side that would need to be watched out for, be mindful of. So, are there any three or four things that we absolutely would tell a dealer or an integrator to, if we're going to go forward with a modernization plan through ASME and come up to code? What do we got to know about those elevators?
The biggest thing with that is the traveler cable, is knowing what cables you have available to utilize. One of the biggest things that we've encountered is we have some of our dealers say, well, we'll just put a Cat 6 in the elevator. And unfortunately, that's not possible to just run a cable in the traveler. You actually have to put a whole new traveler cable in there. And that poses its own problems inherently with Cat 6, untwisting, and eventually just not functioning properly. So thankfully, we do have a solution for that to fight that. The other thing they need to understand is space within the elevator, with behind the COP or the car operating panel. When they take that out, you have to have room for the additional electronics. That could mean maybe they need to produce a brand new operating panel with the cutouts for our device, or we can surface mount a device that takes up very little room in behind. But these are all definitely things that need to be taken into account. Where the buttons are going to be placed would be another one. The buttons are required to be ADA height. So, has to be within 38 to 42 inches, I believe, the height of that. So they need to take that into account as well. A lot of elevators are utilizing buttons that do multiple things. So, in one way, it opens and closes the doors, and then that button also acts as the yes no button. So it requires labeling changes on the operating panel and message changes for that purpose.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier that we start this process really early when we have these conversations. And that is the reason we start early, because there's so much that we have to consider when we're working on this solution. Obviously, it's not something that we can just throw together and we're going to get it done within a few days or a month or whatever. We need to make sure that we plan. And these things aren't missed, because if we come back to a solution afterwards and we've missed something like this as a safety violation, that is a concern. So as a salesperson, during our conversations, this is something that we're discussing from start to finish to make sure this doesn't happen.
So I'll continue with you there, Rocco, on the sales side for a moment. When you approach, when you do the reach out to dealers here in different areas,
Mhm.
where do you start that conversation at? Is it project by project, or is it best to give the dealer an entire overview how the solution works? How do you break it down for them?
I think it really depends on the customer, and it also depends on the integrator, the partner that we're partnering with on this. The reason, if I'm working with a security partner who's just an integrator in the security field, typically they don't do installations within the elevator cab. So once we start doing that, we got to consider that we have multiple partners that will be working on this solution. So with that said, we got to make sure that we have a team meeting where we have everybody who's going to be involved, whether or not it's part of IT or it's part of facilities or it's part of the elevator maintenance engineering team. They need to be engaged in this conversation so they can tell us, what do we need to know about the solution they have in place today, so we can bring it up to code and have a clear understanding of where it needs to go.
Great. Okay. So I think one of the things that I'd like to maybe branch out on as we talk about this is from a technical perspective, Luke, when you look at North America as a whole and elevators in this specific instance, how many of them are getting modernized because of their connection to critical infrastructure?
Not as many as there should be. I don't know the exact number. I know right now we have 4 or 5 different projects on the go with critical infrastructure for this specific purpose. The code really talks about not needing to update them until you make a major change in the elevator when you modernize it. So a lot of the existing elevators will stay put until they need to be replaced or until they need to modify the operating panel in some way, shape, or form. At that point, the inspector will require it to be updated. And that's a conversation that really we're having with all of our dealers and all of our customers ahead of time and say, you be cognizant of this. We have a solution. Doesn't matter where it is. When the time comes, let us know, and we're more than happy to work with you on it. But definitely, there is not as many as there should be. That's a huge barrier for a lot of people in emergency situations.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting nuggets of knowledge I picked up during the preparation for this recording was the amount of states that have not yet said they're going to conform to the ASME 17.1, but the amount of cities within some of those states who are not yet, the cities who are. And so you might find that in the US, the state, your state might not yet conform to it. But you might find that a major metro city inside has taken on. So it's going to be real important if you're a dealer or you're working in the industry in those big metro those cities that you take a look at whether or not they're required. I know that for an example, the state that I live in Illinois, Illinois hasn't taken them on as a state just yet, but that does not mean that cities within this state have not begun to conform or said that this is the day on the calendar that we're going to start requiring it. So mind those very carefully.
Mike, I'll add to that. So obviously being from the same state, I would definitely second that. The city of Chicago is an example. We have definitely got a lot more traction because of the size of that city. And so there's lots of conversations about this code and what we need to do. So we've seen that happen, even though, like you said, this state hasn't. Funny thing is, we've also seen remote locations within Illinois because of the size of a customer. I can't mention the customer name, but we have a very large customer that's down in Southern Illinois, and it's a push for that company. So it doesn't matter that it's not a push for the state. They are pushing all their facilities that are within that state to make sure that they get this taken care of.
Or really, the key thing to understand about the ASME code is a lot of inspectors, even though it's not required, they're using it as a minimum standard. So as long as you meet the minimum standard or exceed it, you're good. So even though it's not built into the code, installing our solution will get you to the minimum standard and exceed it. So when it does come into effect, you're already there, ready to go.
Agreed. Okay. That should wrap us up for time at this juncture. So I want to thank all of our listeners for taking another journey with us on the Command Journey podcast. I want to thank Rocco Galassi and Luke Doucette for joining me as guests today. The first, we've had a two-guest show. So that is our inaugural show, is around elevators. So we want to thank you, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.